Thank you again for joining NAA's daily micro webinar series. My name is Stephanie Anderson, and I am the Industry Operations Manager here at the National Apartment Association. In an effort to provide our membership with timely operational guidance amid COVID-19, we are producing daily updates in the form of micro webinars. Each day, we will focus on a different topic relevant to the apartment industry. At this time, I would like to direct your attention to the screen. Please take a moment to review our disclaimer. Today is the final segment of our four-part micro webinar series on how reopening the economy impacts multifamily management. Leading this great conversation on such an important and timely topic is Rich George, president of the NOI Coach. He is joined by Doug Chasik, president of the Apartment Doctor, to moderate today's presentation. Both speakers are longtime multifamily industry veterans, sought-after national speakers, and well-respected educators. Today's important conversation will focus on finding the new way for multifamily management. Doug, welcome back, and thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks very much, Stephanie, and welcome everybody. Rich, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad that Stephanie has tolerated us for the last 3 days to bring us back. I'm sure she's ready to get rid of us.
Uh-oh. Well, as you so often like to say, let's put a bow on this thing. You know, we're at stage 3. We're finding the new way. What is the new way? What does that mean?
You know, I think I said it the other day when we started this. I just actively avoided, when we put this together, the words new normal, because there is nothing normal about this. It really is, what's the future going to look like in this world where pandemic is not something we talk about, it's something that's real. And, you know, I think that an overruling thought here is somewhere inside all of us, we just want things to go back to the way that they used to be, right? And that's what, when we talk about reopening, I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, in the next couple of weeks, things are going to be back to normal. But I hate to call it out there, but it's true. There is no normal at this point in time. We're going to find this. And the good thing about this, for those of you that have gone through the various gentrifications of your life, you know, there's been version 1.0 of Rich to version 1.5 to version 2 to 2.1, and I'm probably on version 4.0 of Rich George. But each time they come back, they're better. And so whatever is the version 2.0 of our world of multifamily management, I guarantee it's going to be better. It won't feel better for a while because Doug, you and I have had this conversation for years about change, because we all really fight against change. We push back against this concept of change. And the older I get, the more I don't want to change, whether it's software or whatever it is. Because somewhere deep inside, I know that whatever it was I did yesterday didn't kill me. And today you're asking me to do something different. And you know what? That might finally be the thing that kills me. And I don't want that to be the case. So we have to find that new way, whatever it is. And we have to find how it's going to lead to a better end for us.
Yeah, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone.
Love
and
that.
We're human. We like being comfortable. The pitfall for folks to be aware of, though, is as we go from version 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.2, the worst thing we can do is to look back at 1.0 and say, oh, I wish I would have, you know what? If you didn't do 1.0, you never would have got to 1.1. So you are where you are. And as we're moving forward now, you know, how are we preparing? What are you suggesting in terms of preparation for going forward? What's the best way to ensure success in this new way?
You know, I said this the other day. I don't know when this stage, the stage 3, will necessarily begin. I mean, technically it begins now. Pardon me. It begins now, but when will this really kick in? It's when we get past the biggest hill here, when we get over that crest. And I'm not talking about flattening the curve. Once we've had this experience under our belt, one of the first things that we need to do is we need to learn from our lessons. You know, what if we what have we learned just in the past 5 weeks? I don't know about you, but for me personally, whether it's vicariously through my clients with my own assets or even with my own family, there's so many lessons learned from this thus far. And it's important that we start to document this stuff, because before you know it, we're going to be too far beyond it to remember it. So we need to be asking those questions. What have we done well? What could we improve? What are some mistakes that we could avoid? Really that after action report. Watch the game tape and figure out how this is going to improve.
How often would you suggest doing that? Is that something we should do daily, weekly? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this: if I were running a company like the last company that I ran before I went into executive coaching and consulting, I would, like I said in the beginning, we'd put together these work groups. I would take some of my most influential people, the people that I trust the most within my organization, a small group of people representing a good cross section of my employees, so we have balanced voices, and I would start working through these stages. And truly, that committee, if you will, should be meeting, in my opinion, once a week for the rest of the year. They may have weeks where they are just overwhelmed with problems that they have to put out. That's probably the way the beginning's going to look. It's going to feel a little bit like the chaos theory. But as we go through the year, I think whether it feels like, okay, things are settling down, we don't need to meet, this is where we can really start to learn these after action things. We can say, we don't have to spend our time today talking about how we're going to fix yesterday. We can spend our time today talking about what can we learn from yesterday.
Yeah, it's, as you were talking about it, and in the context of everything that you've shared with us so far, I was sort of extrapolating from one-on-ones, thinking that you get together Monday mornings, talk about what you're going to be doing, and then you get together Friday afternoons, talk about what you did, what worked, what needs work, what you're going to do going forward, and then sort of rinse and repeat. And also a good dose of another one of your favorite topics, which is journaling.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to learn from this experience, and this is personal as well as professional advice. I look at this experience, and we have different lenses that we do, and depending on the day and the mood that we're in. But when are we all going to get this opportunity to sit back and think? As property managers, we spend our lives putting out fires, and literally sometimes. What a great opportunity for us to learn and grow and be thinking about tomorrow and forward looking, because that's our job as investment managers. It's we have to be prepared for those future issues, if you will. And that's the reason that we have to be thinking of pandemic planning as a key element of our emergency action plans. We've taught for years, we need to have plans for what happens if there's a tornado, a fire, an earthquake, all of those natural disasters. And for many of us, our EAPs had a couple of pages in there about pandemic. We've added in the recent years active shooter, we've added all these things, but we've always had pandemic. But man, if you go back and look at that today, knowing what you know, we can probably all laugh at our plans and say, wow, what planet were we on? Our pandemic planning needs to include beyond just like COVID-19. This is a virus. From what we know now, it's not airborne. What if COVID-20 is airborne? Does that change how we react? What if it's a chemical or a biological weapon? Does that change how we behave? When I said COVID-20 to one of my clients the other day, and the first words out of her mouth was, shut your mouth. Basically, like, don't start talking about what the next one's going to be, but you never know. And we have to be thinking about this and planning for it. But man, what a better perspective we have now to be rewriting that pandemic plan.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you heard that the head of the CDC yesterday was talking about exactly that this coming winter could be a double whammy with the flu season, as well as whatever the next iteration of COVID-19 is. So yeah. With all of this stuff going on, what legal changes do you foresee impacting us?
I think that there's a number of changes that we need to be looking at. And when we were putting together this third phase, you know, the thoughts that you and I had just preparing for this were overwhelming, and we really had to bring it down. So what I want to preface these next couple of points is I think that people need to be in those task forces or work groups really spitballing, brainstorming, writing down all the things that can change. But I want to bring up one, and you know, we've got a great resource in NAA, and I love how the NAA lease has become just such a prevalent part of our business. For those of you that are using it, congratulations, it's a great lease. For those of you that aren't, now's your chance to maybe do some research and decide to start using it, because one of the things that I think that I would love to see, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'd love to see a change where we maybe put a clause in our lease in the event of a pandemic. Do households need to let us know if they've gotten a potential exposure? Do they need to let us know if they have a symptom so that we can react differently doing service? You know, and this is even outside of, you know, where we're in quarantine now, where we can say we're not going to do service except for emergencies. But I'd love to be a requirement of the lease that people notify us if there's a potential for exposure. Just one of my original thoughts. I don't know how that plays out on the legal front, but the nice thing is knowing that our resource with NAA is we got the legal minds that can do it, and can also lobby for making it allowable if it's not, because it really protects us. I think we also have to keep our eye on what OSHA is doing. You know, OSHA came out of the gate, from my perspective, came out of the gate on this very slowly. We didn't hear much from OSHA, but employee safety is obviously a huge piece of this. So I do expect, just like we have the bloodborne pathogen standard and the lockout tagout standard and hazard communication standard, I have a feeling there's going to be maybe an addition to the bloodborne pathogen to be a viral or pandemic epidemiology rule sets that we have to do. Also look at our local health authorities. I believe that they're going to probably be the first ones that are going to do some requirements of some of the stuff we talked about in stage one of what's acceptable cleaning protocol. You know, Doug, yesterday when we were talking, when we did the radio interview that we did, you had talked about modeling after the hospitality industry. Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think that I was listening to Barry Sterlick of Starwood Group talking about how they're going to be marketing cleanliness, and they're going to be focusing on all the different steps they take. I get emails, I'm sure you get the same emails from Delta, and Delta, instead of promoting exotic destinations, is promoting how carefully they clean and sanitize their airplanes, and how they're not selling middle seats, and how they're maintaining social distancing. And the whole marketing focus, I think, is changing, that we have to promote how we're taking care of people. Given how comprehensive CDC recently published a guide to working in the COVID-19 workplace, and given how comprehensive that guide was, I agree with you that it's going to get codified into new standards. So it's a new world. And with all of the things that you shared with us, Rich, and all of the different changes and transformations that we are going to be experiencing, and as managers and leaders driving in many cases, we also have the time restriction. So what's one more thing that we should really zero in on?
You know, Doug, before I transition to that, I want to respond to something that you said, because there is, I think, one more thing that we highlighted that we wanted to include in this. But you had mentioned yesterday that, you know, it's going to be just as much about cleaning and sanitizing and selling that. I mean, it's going to become a marketing thing, just like you were talking about. Starwood is marketing that. Delta is marketing that. It's also going to be the perception. You know, we have to manage the perception of people. I was sharing the story with you yesterday. The last trip that I took before this started, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and when I went into that airport, it was a very humid day in the spring, and that the airport itself just smelled like an armpit. Not putting down Omaha by any means, but it just did not smell good. But then when I boarded my flight, and this had been creeping up. I'd been out there for a week. This had been really creeping up, and it looked like we were going to be doing shutdowns, and everybody was, so I had my wipes, and I was going to wipe down my space on the plane, all of this wonderful stuff. But I got on the plane, and Delta had not done a good job of cleaning that plane. And because I saw some papers on the floor, gave me the thought that, nothing's been sanitized in this thing. And I was thinking, it would have been really simple, even if they hadn't done a great job of cleaning that plane, had they walked down that center aisle with 2 cans of Lysol, spraying on both sides right before I walked on, it would have given me this mental thought of, oh man, they did a great job. We have to be thinking about how can we not only be doing the real work, but making sure our residents and our customers see that that's what we're doing. I think that's critical.
That's such a great point, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that our customers and employees are going to be hypersensitive. They're also going to be hypercritical.
Absolutely. So that third thing that I wanted to share is that, we have to think of ourselves like miniature governments, right? We keep hearing about our national stockpile, our state stockpiles, and how they're depleted. And we think about our own quote unquote stockpiles in our sites. And most of my clients didn't have enough hand sanitizers. They didn't have enough wipes. They didn't have enough masks. They didn't have enough Tyvek suits. They didn't have enough face shields or any of that stuff. So I believe that our planning moving forward, just like we're forecasting future revenues for our owners, like we talked about yesterday, we also have to be forecasting the necessary supplies to get us through an event just like we're going through now. Now, I don't think that we all need 1 million masks in our maintenance shops, but we need to have enough supply to get us through probably 60 days. And also realizing that consumption goes up in a time like this, because now those disposable masks, we actually are disposing them more often, like we should be, or the latex gloves. Every time I've taught CAM or CAPS as a national faculty member for NAA for the last couple of years, I've given the advice to managers and portfolio managers that, you not only need to be buying latex gloves for your sites, you need to make sure that they're rebuying them. Because if you buy a box and 9 months later they haven't bought more, they're not using them. We need to be checking that. Inspect what we expect, right?
And in that same vein, we also need to be aware that stuff doesn't last forever. The fizz goes out of hydrogen peroxide. The little nose felt on an N95 mask turns into dust after 10 years sitting on a shelf. So along with stockpiling, we've also got to be inspecting, as you say, what we expect and making certain that what we stockpiled is usable. I had no idea that N95 masks had an expiration date. I didn't know you could open up a bottle of peroxide and it was flat because I bought it 18 years ago at CVS or whatever. So those are very, very, very good points for us to remember, Rich. Thank you. What else?
Again, I'm going to circle back for those of you that have taken the pain and been sadomasochistic and stayed with us for all 4 days. It comes back to negligence. Everything we do, we need to ask ourselves, does it meet the smell test of a reasonable person? Do we have a reasonable response to what is a foreseeable risk? It really boils down to that. I can't stress that enough. There's so much, as content creators, Doug, you and I, we leave so much on the cutting room floor as we prepared for these micro webinars. They're called micro webinars for a reason. So we wanted to keep this intentionally short. We could have pontificated for days on end, but you know what? You've got some very talented people in your teams, and those talented people, you really need to put them in charge of being creative and coming up with your plan of how you're going to migrate through this. Doug, do you have anything else that you want to add before we wrap up the 4th of our series here?
I know it's a time to be mindful, be compassionate, be empathetic, and above all, be human. Be human.
Ruthlessly compassionate, to channel back to your own words. We have to remind ourselves of that. Doug, tell people how they can get in touch with you or what what they can rely on you for should they need your help or your services.
These days, I'm still focused on fair housing, doing a lot of fair housing webinars, fair housing consulting, was doing expert witness work until the courts decided to shut down. So I can be reached at my email and my phone number, which is on one of these slides at the end. Also, I've been privileged to be asked by both NAA and Grace Hill to contribute content. So go to the NAA website, naahq.org, and take a look. There's a number of webinars that I've been doing. And if you need a webinar for your company or you have a question, give me a holler. I'm pretty much homebound these days.
You know, and just to remind people a little bit about myself, I am the NOI coach, and where Doug focuses in on the fair housing piece of this, I'm an operations guy. So I'd be happy to work with your work groups or your teams and help spur the conversation as you start to come out of this. I want to say thank you. You know, my contact information as well as on the screen. Want to say thank you to NAA, who's been just such a tremendous resource through this whole epidemic. And thank you to Stephanie. She's put together and assembled some great subject matter. You know, if you haven't had a chance to stay up with these micro webinars, go back. They're all out there and catch up on them because they're nice, quick little hits that will inspire thought and growth because we are constantly learning. Thank you again, Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie.
Rich, Doug, it has just been an absolute pleasure having you both speak to our membership this week. This topic has just been extremely relevant to the multifamily industry owners and operators, and you both have provided guidance and advice to assist our industry professionals as they navigate their new way. And for that, we are truly grateful. I do encourage our members to reach out to Doug and Rich should you have any questions or need additional advice and resources for your own companies because they are just the best. For more information on this topic and others related to COVID-19, we do invite you back to our coronavirus resources and guidance page at naahq.org. Thank you again so much for joining us. We appreciate you all. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay safe.